What happens when a black family in Atlanta orders a baby and ends up raising a Chinese kid with the swagger of the hood? Fakin Da Funk wasn't just another 90s comedy. It was a wild, funny, and surprisingly heartfelt ride that showed us what happens when cultures collide, mix, and somehow make it work. Welcome to Movie Bites, where we keep the classics alive. Let's take a trip back to Fakin Da Funk, the low-budget film that gave us big laughs and even bigger memories. First up is Joe Lee, played by the one and only Ernie Hudson. Now, Joe was just a regular, church-going man living in Atlanta with his lovely wife. Shout out to our ATL viewers. We see y'all. Joe wasn't just any man, though. He was a preacher, grounded in faith, family, and doing things the right way. And like many couples, he and his wife were ready to grow their family. So they decided to go the adoption route. But here's where things get hilarious. They were expecting a black baby and ended up with a Chinese baby instead. Yeah, you heard that right. Talk about a divine mix-up. I mean, let's be real. How often do you come across a black man with the last name Lee? That name must have thrown the whole adoption agency into a tailspin. At first, Joe was like, what in the name of sweet tea is going on here? But over time, he warmed up to the little guy. And not only did he accept him, he raised him like his own son. He taught him the ways of black culture, gave him that southern swag, and made sure that boy knew what it meant to grow up in the ATL, regardless of where he came from. And Ernie Hudson? He played this role to perfection. At the time, Ernie was 52 years old, but he was already a veteran in the game. His film career kicked off in the late 70s, and by the time Fakin Da Funk hit screens, he was a familiar face. Of course, many of us know him best as Winston Zeddemore from the Ghostbusters franchise. But Ernie's resume doesn't stop there. He's been in Leviathan, 1989, The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, 1992, The Crow, 1994, The Ron Clark Story, 2006, and honestly, the list just goes on and on. Now at 79 years old, Ernie is still out here doing his thing, staying active in the industry and showing no signs of slowing down. But for those of us who grew up watching Fakin Da Funk, he'll always be that black man who ordered a baby and got a whole different package. Standing right beside Joe Lee through it all was his wife, Annabelle Lee. Wait a minute, is that Pam Grier? Yes, it is. That is Pam Grier, the queen herself, holding it down with grace, strength, and that unmistakable presence. She was 48 years old at the time, and she played Annabelle with a calm spirit that never cracked, even in the middle of one of the wildest mix-ups imaginable. When that adoption surprise hit, expecting a black baby and getting a Chinese one, Annabelle didn't panic, didn't complain. She looked at that baby and saw what really mattered, a child who needed love. She embraced little Julian like he was her own flesh and blood and raised him just the same. And even after she had her own biological child, their second born, she never played favorites. Both kids were hers, and she made sure they knew it. When Joe Lee passed away, it was Annabelle who held the family together. She packed up and moved from Atlanta to South Central LA, determined to give her boys a better future. Now let's be real. How's a Chinese black kid supposed to survive the streets of South Central with the Crips around the corner? That's the tension the film plays with, and Annabelle stays solid through it all. And Pam Grier? She brought straight-up sass and soul to that role. By then, she was already a living legend, known for her trailblazing roles in 1970s action, blaxploitation, and women in prison films. We're talking iconic performances in Coffee, 1973, Foxy Brown, 1974, and let's not forget, that same year she was in Fakin Da Funk, she also starred in Jackie Brown, 1997, a Quentin Tarantino hit that reminded the world just how powerful she really is. But beyond the screen, Pam Grier is a woman I deeply respect. She fought and beat cancer, stayed grounded in her faith, and never compromised her values, even turning down marriage to basketball legend Kareem Abdul-Jabbar because she refused to convert to Islam just to make it happen. That's conviction. Today, Pam is 76 years old, and I wish her nothing but health, strength, and blessings. Moving on, we've got the man of the hour, Julian, played by Dante Basco. This was the kid who had been adopted by Joe and Annabelle Lee, a loving black couple from Atlanta, and raised like one of their own. And let me tell you, By the time we meet Julian in the film, he's grown into a confident, charismatic, and swagger-filled young man who completely outdid what I expected from him. And before I go any further, kudos to the Your Mama jokes. Seriously, those were some of the best parts of the movie. They had me laughing out loud. Now, when you looked at Julian, you saw a typical Chinese teenager. But the moment he opened his mouth, straight up hood energy. You could instantly tell this kid had been raised in a black neighborhood. He had the slang, the rhythm, the confidence, and that smooth, street-smart edge that made him instantly relatable. And like a lot of kids from the hood, Julian could hoop. Dude could play basketball, but more than that, he could destroy you with a killer Your Mama comeback. And that mix of cultures made it absolutely hilarious. At the time, Dante Basco was 22 years old. And even though he played a Chinese character, Dante himself is Filipino-American, born and raised in the US. He had already shown up on the big screen in films like Hook, 1991, where he played the iconic Rufio, and The Perfect Weapon, also 1991. After Fakin Da Funk, Dante kept it pushing and built a strong career across both film and television. But where he really left his mark? Voice acting. If you've ever watched Avatar: The Last Airbender, you know that voice. Prince Zuko. That's right, Dante is Zuko. And that performance? Legendary. Today, Dante Basco is 49 years old and still out here thriving. But to many of us who watched Fakin Da Funk, he will always be that Chinese kid with a black soul, a basketball in one hand, and a Your Mama joke in the other. Now as Julian is out here trying to prove himself, find his place, and juggle his identity like it's hot potatoes, he meets Kareen, a fly, rich young lady from Baldwin Hills, played by none other than Tatiana Ali. Now let me tell you, Julian sees Kareen and it's a wrap. Homeboy is instantly sprung. He's got a major crush, and he's willing to do whatever it takes to impress her. Kareen, for her part, gives him a chance and agrees to go on a date. But this ain't just any regular date. Midway through, Kareen casually drops that she speaks Japanese, because of course she does. And what does Julian do? This man panics, fakes the funk, literally, and starts pretending like he can speak Chinese, which he most definitely cannot. It's hilarious because here's the twist. Kareen thinks Julian is trying to act black just to impress her, when in reality, he was raised black, and he's the one trying to reconnect with his Chinese roots. That whole misunderstanding? Classic. It's funny, it's real, and it says a lot about identity, perception, and the masks we sometimes wear to fit in. And shout out to the film for actually letting this love story breathe. We get to see them grow, connect, and eventually learn that you don't need to act different to make someone like you. The real ones will love you for who you are, not for who you're trying to be. Now let's talk about Tatiana Ali. She was just 18 years old at the time, but already a star thanks to her iconic role as Ashley Banks on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And here's a fun fact I just made up but feels way too accurate. 98% of white teenage boys in the 90s had Tatiana Ali as #1 on their Jungle Fever wish list. Now, after Fakin Da Funk, Tatiana didn't really dive into high-profile movie roles, but make no mistake, she's been killing it on the small screen. Most recently, she made an appearance in the Bel-Air reboot, a nice little full-circle moment for all of us 90s kids. Today, she's 46 years old, still stunning, still working, and still got that natural grace that made all of us root for her from day one. Fakin Da Funk was a film full of mix-ups and misunderstandings, and Mei Ling, played by Margaret Cho, was right in the middle of the confusion. Now, where did her mix-up come from? Well, let me tell you. Mei was a Chinese student sent on an exchange program to South Central LA, and somewhere along the way, the paperwork must have done a backflip, because instead of ending up with a Chinese host family, she ends up staying with a black family. And the result? Pure comedy. Mei was Chinese, but she was trying real hard to act black so she could blend in. And let's just say it was hilarious. From the way she talked to how she carried herself, it was clear she was doing the most to fit in with her surroundings. The clash between culture and identity made her scenes memorable and funny in that awkward, over-the-top kind of way. At the time, Margaret Cho was 29 years old, and she was already making a name for herself. That same year, she also appeared in the blockbuster film Face Off, alongside John Travolta and Nicolas Cage. Though Margaret is of Korean descent, she was born and raised right here in the US, and she brought her own unique flavor to every role she played. After Fakin Da Funk, she went on to star in movies like Ground Control, 1998, and appeared in a bunch of lesser-known films that still had solid performances. But where she really shines? Stand-up comedy. This woman can roast you so hard, you'll laugh and cry at the same time. She's sharp, fearless, and genuinely one of the funniest comics out there. Today, Margaret Cho is 56 years old, still out here killing stages, repping her voice unapologetically. But for those of us who remember Fakin Da Funk, she'll always be that Chinese girl with the wild accent, trying her best to act hood and making us laugh the whole way through. In the midst of all the mix-ups and the confusion stood Mr. Bill, played by the one and only John Witherspoon. And if you already feel like you're watching Friday all over again, you're not alone. Now, Mr. Bill was just trying to do his good deed and host an exchange student named Mei Ling from Canada, or so he thought. But instead, he and his family ended up with Mei Ling from China. At first, Mr. Bill was hesitant. He wasn't sure what to do with this Chinese girl standing in his living room, trying to find her place in South Central. But eventually, he warmed up to her, just like a father would to a daughter. And that's what made it so heartwarming. Alongside his wife and daughter, Mr. Bill gave us some of the funniest comic relief in the whole film. The timing, the facial expressions, the little outbursts. You already know what kind of magic John Witherspoon brought to the screen. It honestly felt like I was watching a Friday sequel before the real one ever dropped. And let's keep it real, this film had a tiny budget. We're talking about $175,000, but Witherspoon brought credibility and presence like it was a blockbuster. That's what he did. He showed up, and he delivered. At the time, John Witherspoon was 55 years old and already a legend in his own right. His film credits were deep, including roles in Hollywood Shuffle, I'm Gonna Get You Sucka, House Party, The Five Heartbeats, The Meteor Man, and of course, Friday. And let's not forget, he was a lead actor in the Wayans Bros sitcom where he played Pops and gave us endless laughs with his bang, bang, bang energy. John Witherspoon was in everything that defined the culture. Even as the new millennium rolled in, he kept making moves, most notably as the voice of Granddad in the iconic animated series The Boondocks, a role that made a whole new generation fall in love with his style. Sadly, the comedy world lost a giant in 2019 when John Witherspoon passed away at 77 years old from a heart attack. But to those of us who remember Fakin Da Funk, he'll always be Mr. Bill, the man who welcomed the wrong student and made it the right kind of hilarious. Speaking of legends, we've got to take a moment to honor the incomparable Nell Carter, who portrayed Claire, Mr. Bill's wife, in Fakin Da Funk. Now, we all know that any household with a John Witherspoon character at the head is bound to be full of chaos, jokes, and loud moments. But Claire was that calming presence that balanced it all out. She was the heart of the home. When her husband was losing it over the idea of hosting Mei Ling, the Chinese exchange student, it was Claire who stepped in with love and logic. She calmly convinced him that hosting Mei Ling wasn't just about helping someone. It was about bridging cultures and giving their daughter Tracy a chance to see the world from a different perspective. She believed in the beauty of that connection. And I really liked her for that. Claire was caring, wise, and brought so much warmth to the film. At the time, Nell Carter was 49 years old, and she had already made her mark in the entertainment world. Most people remember her as the sharp and sassy housekeeper on the sitcom Gimme a Break, which aired from 1981 to 1987. Her performance was so powerful, she earned 2 Emmy and 2 Golden Globe nominations for it. But Nell wasn't just a sitcom star. She also graced the big screen in films like Modern Problems, 1981, and The Crazy Sitter, 1995, always bringing her signature charm, strong voice, and magnetic presence. It deeply saddens me to say that Nell Carter passed away in 2003 at the age of 54 in her Beverly Hills home. She died too soon, And according to reports, she was alone at the time of her death. That still stings. She may be gone, but never forgotten. To all of us who grew up watching her, she'll always be the strong, sassy, and soulful woman who brought warmth wherever she went, especially in Fakin Da Funk. Tichina was in this film too. And let me tell you, it caught me off guard. I was like, wait a minute, is that Pam from Martin? And yes it was. Tichina played Tracy, Mr. Bill and Claire's daughter, and once Mei Ling landed in their South Central home, it was Tracy who took her under her wing. She didn't just show her the ropes, she brought her into the world. She took her out to parties, introduced her to the neighborhood, and we actually got to see a Chinese girl out there busting moves on the dance floor, like it was nothing. It was funny, it was fresh, and it felt like a sweet little culture swap in real time. And you could tell Tracy was a real one. She was kind, she was cool, and above all, she was a good friend. She made sure Mei Ling didn't just survive in South Central, she belonged. Now here's what really shocked me. This movie had a low budget, and yet here we were, getting Tichina Arnold, who at the time was a hot prospect. She was 28 years old and had already cemented herself as TV royalty thanks to her unforgettable role as Pam in the classic sitcom Martin. But Tichina wasn't new to this. She was true to this. Her film career kicked off way back in the late 80s, and by the time Fakin Da Funk came around, she'd already been in movies like Little Shop of Horrors, How I Got Into College, and Scenes from a Mall. She's always had that sass, that spice, that bold energy that makes whatever she's in instantly more fun to watch. And of course, after this film, she went on to give us another classic, her role as Rochelle, the no-nonsense mama in Everybody Hates Chris. That role is legendary. She had us all laughing, nodding, and saying, "I don't need this. My man has 2 jobs." Today, Tichina is 55, still aging like a queen, and still lighting up the small screen. Most recently, you might have seen her in the sitcom The Neighborhood. But for me, I prefer the classics. Tichina in Martin, in Everybody Hates Chris, and even in Fakin Da Funk. That's the Tichina I'll always love. Taking center stage in Fakin Da Funk is none other than Tone Loc, stepping into the role of Frog. And trust me, Frog was that dude you did not want problems with. He was grimy, unpredictable, and always up to something shady. The type to take your daughter out, bring her back late, then stare you down on the porch like, "What you gonna do about it, old man?" Just ask Tracy's pops. He tried to square up, and let's just say, that didn't go so well. Frog was deep in the game, dealing drugs, getting Julian's brother Perry caught up, and bringing a whole lot of chaos wherever he showed up. He had that same energy Debo brought in Friday, and Tone Loc owned that character. At the time, he was just 31 years old. Yeah, I know, it's wild. Even back then, the man looked like he'd already lived 3 lifetimes. And to be honest, in the present day, Tone Loc looks like he's pushing 80, but he's actually 59. Before acting, Tone Loc was killing it in music. His 1988 hit Wild Thing put him on the map and even got him an MTV Music Award nomination. And that raspy, unmistakable voice, it landed him roles in Poetic Justice, Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, and Spy Hard. He's also been open about his health struggles, including a lifelong battle with seizures. But through it all, he stayed active, stayed relevant, and stayed a part of the culture. Say what you want about how old he looks, but Tone Loc, that man is a legend. Now let's get into Brandon, played by Duane Martin, and man, this guy was a certified pain in the ass in Fakin Da Funk. If he wasn't rolling a doobie, he was out there trying to shoot some hoops. He was even doing some bets on the side. But here's the kicker. He lost every single bet. At first, Brandon was that guy, always clowning Julian. I mean, how could a Chinese kid raised by Black parents be so good at basketball and have all that swagger with the ladies? That was Brandon's biggest mystery. Julian was out there hitting jump shots and throwing down your mama jokes like he was born on Crenshaw and Slauson, and Brandon was not having it. But here's the thing. As the movie went on, you kind of started to like the dude. He had his insecurities, but he was funny, and he brought that everyday South Central energy we all recognize. You could tell deep down, he just wanted to matter. Now, Duane Martin was 32 years old at the time, and by then, he had already made his presence known in the game. He'd starred in films like White Men Can't Jump and The Inkwell. He was also in Above the Rim. After Fakin Da Funk, he went on to be in Scream 2. And in 2003, he popped up in Deliver Us from Eva, which y'all know is another one of my favorites. He also played a lead role in the sitcom All of Us. Remember that one? Now, in recent years, he's kind of slowed down on the acting side, but you've probably seen him on the reality show Real Husbands of Hollywood. Today, Dwayne is 59, and while he might not be on every screen like he used to, the man left a mark. And in Fakin Da Funk, he will always be that dude who just couldn't believe Julian had game, but still stuck around to witness it all go down. Now standing next to Brandon, or in this case, usually slouched next to him somewhere cracking up, was none other than Charlie, played by the hilarious Chris Spencer. Let me tell you, Charlie was a menace, just like his boy Brandon, always clowning, always running his mouth, and always high enough to think his theories actually made sense. I mean, this dude came up with every kind of explanation you could think of, just trying to figure out how a Chinese kid raised in a black neighborhood had so much swagger. And then on top of that, he's trying to figure out why Mei Ling, who's clearly Chinese, was moving like she grew up off Slauson and Crenshaw. At some point, even Charlie was like, man, I gotta be high. And let's be real, he probably was. He even dropped a your mama joke on an old man, which, yes, we'll get to later. But that just tells you who Charlie was. No filter, no limits, just pure, uncut foolery. Now, Chris Spencer was 29 years old at the time, and this wasn't his first run in front of the camera. He'd already popped up in movies like Blankman, A Low-Down Dirty Shame, and the comedy classic Don't Be a Menace. On TV, he was out here doing his thing on In Living Color and The Jamie Foxx Show. But here's the part most people don't realize. Chris Spencer is low-key a major force behind the scenes. He helped create MTV's Wild 'N Out with Nick Cannon, and to this day, he's still out there writing, producing, and telling jokes that hit. Now at 57, Chris is still doing stand-up comedy, still respected across the Black community, and still very much active in the industry. He's one of those guys who's been quietly shaping the culture, making you laugh even when you don't realize he's behind the scenes, pulling the strings. Remember that old man who got roasted by Charlie? That's him, Ernest, played by the one and only Reynaldo Rey. We first meet Ernest chilling at the barbershop. This was a place where old heads went, not really for a haircut, but to talk smack, argue about nothing, and relive their glory days. But the second time we see him, man's out on the block, ready to beef with the young bloods, especially Charlie, who wasn't backing down. And that's when Charlie drops one of the wildest your mama style lines of the movie, telling him that he was so old he had to put his wiener in the freezer just to get it hard. A moment so foul, but so funny, it became a classic. Now, if that face looks familiar, it should, because those of us who watched Friday know Reynaldo Rey as Red's daddy. Reynaldo Rey was 57 when he brought Ernest to life in Fakin Da Funk. And what he added was that unmistakable community uncle energy, the kind of OG who's seen it all, heard it all, and still finds time to argue with kids on the sidewalk. His acting career stretches all the way back to the 70s and 80s, and trust me, the man has receipts. He appeared in cult classics like Harlem Nights, A Rage in Harlem, White Men Can't Jump, and House Party 3. Sadly, Reynaldo Rey passed away in 2015 at the age of 75 due to complications from a stroke he suffered a year earlier. But he left behind a legacy of laughs and realness, the kind that made you feel like he could have easily been your uncle or your pop's loud friend from up the street. To this day, I'll always remember him as that old man who got clowned in Fakin Da Funk and still had enough fire to talk back. Now here's a character that really tested my patience. Perry, played by Rashawn Now. Perry was Julian's little brother, but unlike Julian, who was Chinese and adopted, Perry was Joe and Annabelle's biological son. You'd think growing up in the same household, raised with the same love, these two would be close. And for a while, they were. But once the family packed up and moved from Atlanta to South Central, something in Perry changed. Suddenly, he started running with the wrong crowd, trying way too hard to be something he wasn't. The real turning point? That scene where Perry tells Julian he's embarrassed by him. Yeah, that one hit hard. Here's Julian, just trying to find his place in the world, full of heart, full of hustle, and his own brother throws shade like that. It was one of those moments that made you want to jump through the screen. Perry wasn't just acting out. He was being a full-blown wannabe. And for real, I couldn't stand him by the end of it. Now, Rashaan Nall, who played Perry, was just 17 years old when the film dropped. But he already had some strong credits under his belt. Before Fakin Da Funk, you might have caught him in the TV biopic Tyson, or making moves in shows like The Parenthood and Hanging with Mr. Cooper. After Fakin Da Funk, Rashaan kept the momentum going for a while. He had solid roles in the sitcom One-on-One and its spin-off Cuts. But after that, he quietly stepped back. His last film appearance was in 2009, and since then, it seems like he chose a different path, away from the spotlight. Today, Rashaan Nall is 45, and even though Perry got on our nerves, Rashaan played him with a realness that stuck with us. Fakin Da Funk was a low-budget film, no doubt about it, but even with that limited budget, they managed to pull off something wild. Casting Bo Jackson. Yes, that Bo Jackson. The former two-sport pro who dominated both the NFL and MLB. And in this film, he showed up as a reverend. Let that sink in. Bo Jackson played a small but memorable role, stepping into the pulpit at Atlanta Baptist and delivering a sermon that had folks laughing and nodding at the same time. In that scene, he tells the congregation, "Without faith, it's impossible to please the Lord, but with faith, anything's possible." It was unexpectedly hilarious seeing this powerhouse athlete quoting scripture with that straight face. Bo was 35 at the time, and by then his legendary sports career had already come to an end following a career-ending hip injury. But even off the field, he found ways to pop up and leave his mark. In fact, many fans will remember his guest appearance on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air too. Just one more moment that proved Bo really could do it all. Today, Bo Jackson is 65 years old, and whether he's remembered for his bat, his helmet, or that reverend's robe, he's still a legend in every sense of the word. Up next is the Chinese waiter, played by Ron Yuan, a character who stole the scene with just a few lines and a whole lot of attitude. He worked at the Chinese restaurant where Julian took Karine on their date, and let's just say, things got awkward real quick. The waiter clocks Julian the second he walks in, and immediately figures out, this dude doesn't speak a lick of Chinese. And instead of letting it slide, he decides to have some fun with it. He messes up their order on purpose, brings them dishes they never asked for, and throws in some serious side-eye along the way. It was tense, awkward, and straight up hilarious. The waiter also couldn't believe how Julian managed to pull a fine-looking lady like Karine. He's watching this whole situation like it's a live soap opera unfolding in his restaurant. Ron Yuan was just 24 when he played that role, but he already had that strong screen presence. Over the years, he's become known for his roles in Sons of Anarchy, Prison Break, Golden Boy, and CSI New York. He's also been in big screen projects like Shaolin Soccer, Fast and Furious, and Disney's live-action Mulan. Today, Ron Yuan is 52 and still going strong. Whether he's acting, directing, or lending his voice to animated series and games, he's still showing up and showing out. And finally, we have Amy Hill, who played the exchange program guide, the woman behind the big mix-up. She was the one who realized that Mei Ling had ended up with the wrong family and came back later trying to fix her mistake. Her interactions with Mr. Bill, played by the legendary John Witherspoon, were brief but had that perfect comedic touch. Watching those two go back and forth, classic. Amy Hill was 44 at the time, and by then, she had already begun building a solid career in television and film. She kicked off her film journey in the early 90s and has popped up in some great roles ever since. You may recognize her from movies like Next Friday and Cheaper by the Dozen. On the TV side, she's been in The Hughleys, My Wife and Kids, One-on-One, and That's So Raven. Today, Amy Hill is 72 years old and still active in the industry. She continues to lend her voice to animated projects, including Lilo and Stitch, and her presence is always a welcome one, whether it's live action or voice work. She's one of those actresses who might not always be front and center, but when she shows up, you know it's about to be good. And that's a wrap on Fakin Da Funk, a low-budget gem that gave us laughs, lessons, and a whole lot of heart. It wasn't about fancy effects or blockbuster hype. It was about culture, identity, and finding your place when the world sees you one way, but you feel another. If you grew up on this film, you already know the feeling. And if you're just discovering it now, welcome to a classic that's been slept on for way too long. If you enjoyed the trip down memory lane, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Movie Bites, where the throwbacks never fade. Thanks for rocking with us. See you next time.